What would you say Arnold Schwarzenegger's best role is? I'm hazarding a guess, most of you would say Terminator 2. And I'd probably agree with you, except I'm making the distinction of his best performance and not the best film that he's in. Arnie's got a unique acting style, to say the least. There's the bodybuilder physique, but also the accent.
Let's party.
Those elements give him a sort of unreal quality as an actor, and his best films utilize that. In Terminator, he's a robot from the future. In Predator, it's a commentary on the tropes of 80s action movies. And for my personal pick for his best acting role, Total Recall, the film has the primary mystery of if it's a dream or not. Arnie couldn't be more perfect for that role, and his performance is a large reason for why that film works so well. Arnie, who was born in Austria, initially started out as a bodybuilder. He landed his first big acting role playing the lead in the film Hercules in New York from 1970. The people behind the film thought his thick Austrian accent was too much, leading them to dub over his performance. That film bombed, and you can see why listening to the dub.
Bucks? Doe? What is this zoological talk about male and female animals?
He had a couple small roles after that, but his next big break was in 1977's Pumping Iron, a docudrama where he played himself. You might know it from this.
I'm like getting the feeling of coming in the gym, I'm getting the feeling of coming at home, I'm getting the feeling of coming backstage when I pump up.
While Pumping Iron was a hit, it took another 5 years for him to have his breakout role in Conan the Barbarian. It's an interesting film. Arnie doesn't have much dialogue throughout. But he most certainly fits the role, and the accent didn't cause him any issues like it did before. Regardless, Conan was a hit. On a budget of $20 million, it made $38 million domestically and over $40 million internationally, making just under $80 million total. And it was received generally well. This started Arnie's rise to action star legend. 2 years later, in 1984, he'd star in The Terminator and the sequel to Conan, Conan the Destroyer. He had a string of hits, bringing us to 1990 with the release of Total Recall. Based on a Philip K. Dick short story, We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, the rights were acquired for an adaptation in 1974. Ronald Shusay and Dan O'Bannon penned the script. The studios had interest, but it was ultimately considered unfilmable with the large budget and extensive visual effects that it would have required. The pair would collaborate on the script for Alien, and with that success, they'd revisit Total Recall. But they had issues resolving the third act of that script. This led the project to be sold to Dino De Laurentiis production company, who had financed projects like Flash Gordon, Conan the Barbarian, and David Lynch's Dune. In 1984, Laurentiis attached David Cronenberg to direct, but there was disagreement of tone between the writers, which led to Cronenberg dropping out of the project. But his influence can still be felt with the presence of the mutants. During this, while Arnie was shooting 1985's Commando and 1986's Raw Deal, he showed interest in the project, but Laurentiis didn't think Arnie was right to lead the film. He liked him as Conan, not in Total Recall. The film eventually got into production, but after already $8 million spent, Laurentiis' production company went bankrupt. Arnie was working on Red Heat at the time, and he convinced the executives at Carlico Pictures, the production company behind that film, to snap up the rights to Total Recall. This led to Arnie being heavily involved in the project. He was effectively an executive producer without the responsibility. He was so committed to making the project work that he oversaw script revisions, casting decisions, and set construction, along with getting a massive payout of over $10 million and 15% of the film's profits. Arnie was a fan of Paul Verhoeven's 1987 hit RoboCop, and attached him as the director. And after a couple of rewrites of the film, it was in production. If I didn't know any better, I would say that Arnie was perfect casting for this role. But it was quite a shock to me to learn that he was so heavily involved in getting the film made. Speaking of the plot, in 2084 on Earth, our protagonist is Douglas Quaid. We open with a dream of him and another girl on Mars, until he wakes up in a panic beside his wife Laurie, who's concerned that he's having the same dream again about a different brunette girl. The next day, Quaid is locked into the news, and we learn that Mars contains a highly valuable resource that is tightly controlled by its colonized leaders. Most importantly, Velos Cohagen. Rebels led by Quato are attempting to overthrow the establishment on Mars and free their people. While we're learning this, Laurie attempts to distract Quaid from the news. He tells her that he feels like he was meant to do something more in this world, before leaving for work. On his trip to work, he sees an advertisement for Recall, an alternative for vacations where you can implant the memory of whatever vacation you want. Quaid talks to his co-worker about going to Recall, who advises against it because one of his friends nearly got lobotomized. Quaid ignores this and goes to Recall anyway, where he meets with one of their salesmen. Quaid gets upsold to the secret agent package, and the salesman explains to him,
"But you rest assured, by the time the trip is over, you get the girl, kill the bad guys, and save the entire planet."
That convinces Quaid, and he gets set up for the procedure. Just before he falls asleep, he customizes some of the options for his trip, and any scene after this could be either a dream or reality. Some argue that the scene we just talked about is part of the dream, but Verhoeven explicitly states that not to be true in the director's commentary.
Realize that the dream really starts at the moment that he falls asleep. So the next scene, which seems to be a fuck up of the machine, is part of the dream.
Right.
So this is the last moment of his reality.
After this, there's lots of twists and turns throughout the narrative, primarily concerned with whether Recall awoke his previous memories as then secret agent Carl Hauser, or he's been in a dream this entire time. Most of the discussion I've seen on this film leans towards it being a dream. Some of the most compelling evidence comes halfway through the film, where Quaid is visited by a doctor from Recall. He tries to wake him up from the dream that he's supposedly having, and even Laurie comes along to try and wake him up. The most important point being that the doctor is the same doctor from the advertisements much earlier in the film. At this point, Quaid has checked into the Hilton Hotel, which is the company partnered with Recall, and it's also a strange decision for someone who's undercover. With this, there's a lot of strange, almost dreamlike qualities that happen during the course of the film. Like earlier when someone from Quaid's past leaves him a suitcase and a random woman tries to steal it. Even the taxi service is quite strange.
We try to make this one a bit funny, because perhaps giving you a clue that it is still a dream.
Part of these dreamlike qualities come from Arnie himself. The way he delivers dialogue often strikes me as a bit disconnected from reality.
What the fuck did I do wrong?
It's larger than life in its presentation. But the most damning evidence is how the film ends with a blue sky on Mars, which is set up at the Recall facility.
That's a new one. Blue sky on Mars.
Been married long?
When the movie ends, just after the blue sky moment, it ends with a fade to white rather than black, a trick often used in media to represent dreams or hallucinations. The clearest example of that jumps to my mind is in Spec Ops: The Line. There is also musical cues that hint towards it being a dream. After the final credits, you can hear Recall's office music, along with other hints from the score throughout the film. The score was a big focus of mine for my 5-part comedy crime miniseries called Midlands Mayhem. You can watch all 5 episodes for free right now on midlandsmayhem.com. But speaking of the Recall office, this is where much of the evidence for the dream interpretation happens. We've mentioned the blue sky already, but then there's the mention of the alien artifacts, how the salesman spells out the entire plot, and of course the woman he describes. She's not only a perfect match to Melina, who we meet about halfway through the film, but even has her photo on the monitor. That seems quite damning, but there are counter-arguments to this. In the novelization of Total Recall, there was an interaction that wasn't in the film between Melina and Quaid. He asks her what she did before all of this, and she says that she was a model for Recall. This brings a whole debate of, should material not present in the piece we're analyzing influence our opinion? That's not a discussion for now, but it at least provides a counterpoint to the most convincing argument towards the whole trip being a dream, if you subscribe to that philosophy. What about the doctor? Well, he tells Quaid that he, along with his wife Laurie, have been implanted into his dream. He's having a freeform delusion based on the recall secret agent package, and to wake up he has to take this pill. But that means that Quaid could kill the Doctor and it would be no concern to him. It would only damage Quaid and stick him further into the delusion. But the Doctor sweats. And why would he if he's not real? You could logic that his job might be on the line or something similar, but what I can't think of a reason for is why Laurie attacks Quaid once the Doctor is killed. She's also allegedly an implant, so the switch from wife to secret agent happens too quickly in my eyes. Some of the most compelling evidence in my mind for the reality interpretation comes through the acting in this film. There's a couple of moments where we hang on a look after a conversation. Like near the start of the film, with this look from Laurie just as Quaid goes to work. Or with the construction worker, who pretty soon after Quaid's trip to recall, we as the audience find out that he's part of the conspiracy and tries to kill him, making his look from earlier even more convincing. Flipping back to the casting decision of Arnie, there was a line that stuck out to me in one of the articles that I read for research for this video. It said that people in 1990 were apprehensive of casting Arnie as an everyman. For me, that entirely misses the point of him in Total Recall. Arnie as an actor stands out so much, making it more credible that he could be a super secret top agent because, well, look at him.
Because of Arnold, you being a superhero, of course, people would always hope and think that it's real, isn't it?
Right.
It's revealed later that Hauser, Quaid's alternate personality, was actually a double agent working for Cohagen to corner the rebels and get a man on the inside to stop their rebellion. One of the arguments I've seen for this being a dream is that this plan is ridiculous and convoluted. There's no way that someone would try this in reality. That argument gets addressed in the film.
Too perfect.
Perfect my ass. You pop your memory cap before we can activate you? Richter goes hog wild, screwing up everything I spent a year planning. Frankly, I'm amazed it worked.
But trying to apply real-world logic to a film like this, I think, is a silly way to make a case for it being a dream. There was an article that said the alien reactor instantly turning the Mars atmosphere to blue was a stretch. But are we really trying to apply logic to a fictional piece of sci-fi tech? That train of logic would apply to every piece of sci-fi equipment throughout the film, and I think it invalidates that take. When you go down that train of thought, a lot of things in the film don't make sense and are dreamlike. Things happen so conveniently, and you're always in the heat of the action. In the film Inception, it's like Cobb says,
You never really remember the beginning of a dream, do you? You always wind up right in the middle of what's going on.
That has quite a similarity with how films are constructed. As someone who works as an editor for his day job, you want to start a scene as late as you can and leave as early as possible. Christopher Nolan on a podcast talked about the difficulty of putting dreams into film. He says, I thought a lot about why dreams are problematic in movies. I think it's because movies are already dreams. I think the way we process film is very similar to the way that we process dreams. They are collective dreams in a way. For whatever evidence I present of Total Recall being in reality, I think the opinion will be heavily weighted towards a dream just because of how films are presented. Even how you see people in films isn't how they'd look in real life. They're under perfect lighting, with hours put into their hair and makeup. They'll even physically transform their bodies for different roles. The presentation of people in movies isn't the same as real life. A common argument for the film's offense being in real life is that we see the perspective of others throughout the film, like Michael Ironside's character. If it were a dream, we would only see Quaid's subjective experience. But maybe that's just the narrative conventions of filmmaking, or in lucid dreams where, apparently, you can see others' perspectives. Or even look at how the salesman describes the entire plot of the film. That's a dead giveaway, right? But when you think about it, that could describe the plot for many movies. Even more so if you consider the cinema landscape pre-1990. For all I can say about Arnie fitting the build of a secret agent, you could also say that it would be difficult to be undercover with that body type. It is an incredibly uncommon look, and feels unreal. Either way you see Arnie, he as an actor could fit into that dream or reality category. That was the intention of director Paul Verhoeven and Arnie coming into this film. They tried as much as possible to have either interpretation of the film be valid. There is even a small detail early in the film with the walls in Quaid and Laurie's apartment.
And when she puts it out and we get suddenly to this landscape, the walls are already fake. The two side walls are blue screen. All these things are preparing us for double realities, isn't it?
Exactly.
But one thing, it seems to be one thing, it turns out to be another thing.
Maybe it was a bunch of fortunate coincidences, or it was intentional design behind the team, or even a combination of both. But how Arnie is utilized in this film is shockingly good. His look, how he delivers his lines, and his action star persona, it all fits perfectly. I literally couldn't think of another actor that could do this role better. That's the joy of Total Recall, that both interpretations could be true.
Well, that's the great thing about the movie, that from the beginning on, it always works on two levels, and the audience always has to guess, what it is, what is reality and what is not.
This is what makes it an all-timer for me. And here we are, still discussing it over 35 years later. I think this film takes place in reality, but I wouldn't fault you for going either way.